Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from New York. I'm Susan Tehrani, and these are the top headlines for this hour. Russian shelling in Kherson has left the southern Ukrainian city without electricity, says the regional governor, after attacks on the recaptured urban hub left at least 2 dead. European Parliament lawmakers vote to call for representatives of Qatar to be temporarily barred from the legislator's premises amid a graft scandal implicating an MEP. Peru declares state of emergency as 8 die in protest over the ouster of President Pedro Castillo. Rights of people to gather and move freely across the nation has been suspended. Prince Harry accuses his brother William of a furious response to his plans to quit royal life, but insisted that he has few regrets about leaving in the final docuseries episodes. Six-time Grand Slam champion Boris Becker is released from jail just 8 months after he was given a 2.5-year sentence for hiding his assets. We start here in the United States. The U.S. has made definitive legislative moves to ban a video hosting service, TikTok. The U.S. Senate has passed a bill banning federal employees from using TikTok on government devices. The bill now needs to be approved by the current House of Representatives before going to the White House for final approval. The quote, "No TikTok on government devices" bill, introduced by a Republican senator, follows a host of state-level actions to ban the social media platform from government-owned devices. The vote is the latest action on the part of the U.S. lawmakers to crack down on Chinese companies amid national security fears that Beijing could use them to spy on Americans. The Senate action comes after North Dakota and Iowa this week joined a growing number of states in banning TikTok. And the states aren't alone. Several federal agencies, including the Defense, Homeland Security, and State Departments, have moved to ban the app from government-owned devices. The move to ban TikTok comes amid fears that the Chinese government could use TikTok to spy on Americans. TikTok has said that the concerns are largely fueled by misinformation. On Wednesday, the company said, quote, "We're disappointed that so many states are jumping on the political bandwagon to enact policies based on unfounded falsehoods about TikTok that will do nothing to advance national security of the United States." TikTok is owned by the Chinese company ByteDance, and according to China's 2017 national intelligence law, Chinese companies are legally obliged to help the government in intelligence-related work. TikTok has said this has not and will not happen, saying that the concerns are largely fueled, again, by misinformation. Joining us live on the show to talk more about this is Elizabeth Braw. She's a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us on WION. The Biden administration has been negotiating with TikTok executives on measures aimed at preventing information TikTok collects on American users, and from that being shared with Beijing. But how effective would such negotiations really be?
Yeah, so the fundamental problem with TikTok and indeed any other social media is that social media arose in a time when the world was largely peaceful, and so nobody really thought of it how it may be used for nefarious purposes by hostile states, and so we're all late to the game in thinking about how should social media be regulated, both when it comes to disinformation and when it comes to the collection of data. And it's absolutely the case that social media platforms of all kinds, but especially TikTok, collect enormous amounts of data from their users, and ordinarily that data would stay with the company and they would use it for to sell advertising. But in the case of companies based in China, that data can be requested by the government, and that's where the problem gets really serious, because given that it's this formidable amount of data, you can learn a lot about people by going through that data. And we should remember that the US government was really quite late to the game in starting to think about this. A few years ago, a dating website called Grindr, which is a dating platform that's used primarily by the gay community, was acquired by a Chinese company. And the U.S. government, the regulator, thought nothing of it. It wasn't required to get U.S. government approval. But then the regulators started thinking, well, what about the national security implications of this? A Chinese company, and by extension the Chinese government, having access to the dating profiles and including things like HIV status and so forth, and indeed gay preferences of people who may not want anybody except the users on that website to have access to that information. So the US government then forced a reversal of that acquisition, but that shows you where we are today.
Yeah, and TikTok is also used by 2/3 of American teens. But regarding its national security implications, what is the U.S. government worried about? Because a similar bill was to be passed during the Trump administration. That didn't go through because of some legal action on the part of TikTok, but things seem pretty serious this time. Can you talk about those legal and national security implications?
Yeah, so the Trump administration tried to get TikTok banned altogether. What this bill that has been passed by the Senate does, and indeed what the actions taken by a couple of states already, what their decisions involve is that people are not allowed to use TikTok on government-issued mobile devices, and that's an action that any government can easily take because it owns the devices, and it also makes sense because it's a government-issued device, mobile phone, should be as safe as possible, as clean as possible. So that's what any government can pretty easily do, and that's what the Senate aims for with this bill that now goes to the House, and then if successful, goes to the White House.
Elizabeth Braw, Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, thank you so much for joining us on WION and for that analysis. Well, moving on, internet users in China might soon face action for liking posts on social media. This is not some exaggerated rumor, but the latest revision to China's cybersecurity law. China's internet watchdog has stepped up its regulation of cyberspace, and after restricted posts and comments, they have now intensified crackdown on likes as a way of expressing dissent against Beijing's COVID policy. Chinese authorities say posts that receive many likes or thumbs up online can probably influence public opinion. Social media companies have been asked to vet posts and comments more closely and have been instructed to immediately remove any illegal or inappropriate remarks. Chinese lawmakers, meanwhile, have started working on the amendment to the cybersecurity law. Under the draft legislation, companies that violate rules will face tough penalties. Operators of what Beijing calls critical information infrastructure can be fined up to 5% of their previous year's revenues if they use services that did not undergo proper security checks. Now, until last month, Beijing stood firm behind its draconian COVID control policies, but the situation soon got out of hand after major protests were held across China against that zero COVID policy. The protests were triggered by a deadly fire in the Xinjiang region. The government has since sharply relaxed the zero COVID restrictions in what's being seen as a move to quell anger. But while it is easing on the virus rules, Beijing is tightening the news around dissent and intensifying violence against anti-state criticism. Back here in the United States, the U.S. Central Bank has hiked its interest rates for the 7th time this year and has warned of more hikes in the future in a bid to rein in on the rapid pace of price increases in the country. The U.S. Federal Reserve raised interest rates by 0.5 percentage points and has further projected at least an additional 75 basis points of increases in borrowing costs by the end of 2023. The U.S. Central Bank's projection of the target federal funds rate raising to 5.1% in 2023 is slightly higher than investors expected heading into this week's two-day policy meeting.
Today, the FOMC raised our policy interest rate by 0.5 percentage point. We continue to anticipate that ongoing increases will be appropriate in order to attain a stance of monetary policy that is sufficiently restrictive to return inflation to 2% over time. In addition, we're continuing the process of significantly reducing the size of our balance sheet.
The Fed's policy rate, which began the year at a near zero level, is now in a target range of 4.25% to 4.5%, which is the highest since late 2007. Fed Chair Jerome Powell said that it's too soon to talk about the U.S. Central Bank's cutting interest rates. He said more evidence was needed to show that inflation is cooling.
The inflation data received so far for October and November show a welcome reduction in the monthly pace of price increases. But it will take substantially more evidence to give confidence that inflation is on a sustained downward path.
In an effort to narrow a trust gap with Africa, President Joe Biden called for a long-term partnership rooted in good governance at a U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit in Washington. Aiming to position the United States as a partner to African countries, President Biden told the African leaders that Washington is, quote, all in on Africa's future. The U.S. president announced an agreement aimed at bolstering trade ties between the United States and Africa as China makes inroads with investment and trade.
The United States is all in on Africa's future. And the work we've done over the past 2 years, building on decades of vital investments made under previous American presidents, has helped make possible the critical steps that I'm about to announce. First, the United States is signing a historic memorandum of understanding with the new African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat. This MOU will unlock new opportunities for trade and investment between our countries and bring Africa and the United States even closer than ever.
Chinese trade with Africa is about 4 times that of the United States, and Beijing has become an important creditor by offering loans with less stringent conditions than Western leaders. Addressing a summit that brought 49 African leaders to Washington, Biden avoided China by name, but made clear the United States would take a different approach.
I present to you a man who you all... And holding the first of its kind summit in 2014 was a watershed moment to cement new kinds of partnerships between our nations. Partnerships not to create political obligation, not or foster dependence, but to spur shared success. And I emphasize shared success and opportunity.
Biden announced more than $15 billion in promised trade investments and new partnerships, including an initiative that pledges $350 million to help the continent's efforts to digitally modernize, and $350 million to advance women's workplace equality and entrepreneurship. The First Lady's office pledged $300 million for cancer prevention, screening, treatment, and research in Africa. Biden has already committed to $55 billion in economic aid to Africa and African countries over the next 3 years. Support for a permanent group of 20 seat for the African Union is also on the table, and the appointment of a special representative to implement summit commitments. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken also pitched increased trade ties between the United States and Africa, saying the United States and African nations have the potential to build one of the 21st century's most successful economic partnerships.
Partnership is at the heart of President Biden's strategy for Africa. Partnerships between the United States and African nations, with the private sector, and between our people. And in a sense, it's as simple as this. The challenges and the opportunities of this moment, from climate change to the clean energy transition, public health, economic opportunity, peace and security, these aren't African issues or American issues. They're global priorities.
However, this push comes as the United States has fallen well behind China in investment in the sub-Saharan African region, which has become a key battleground in an increasingly fraught competition between the major powers. The summit is the first of its kind since 2014, which was held under President Barack Obama.
Clé de l'histoire de nos deux pays, je dirais même de nos deux continents, parce que
There appears to be an entrenching of positions when it comes to Iran, with a number of key developments in recent days. These come amid the breakdown of nuclear talks over the past few months and increasing protests following the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini after her detention by Iran's so-called morality police. Our correspondent Jody Cohen sent us this report. Have a look.
A US-led resolution led to a vote to expel Iran from the UN's Commission on the Status of Women, the first time in the Commission's history that a country has been removed.
Is entirely illegal.
Meanwhile, Syrian opposition media has reported airstrikes against Iranian targets in the country. While no comment has come from Israel, the strikes come after Israel Defense Force Chief Aviv Kohavi confirmed an Israeli airstrike last month on an Iranian arms convoy. And in the latest, Israel, the UAE, Bahrain and Morocco, who signed the Abraham Accords normalization agreements with Israel just 2 years ago, are said to have held a series of meetings to discuss establishing a cyber Iron Dome, a joint cyber defense platform. The move is reportedly aimed at defending against Iranian hacking attacks. And in response to what is seen to be growing international support for the protests against the Islamic Republic, an Iranian editor who is close to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei has suggested that Iran should close the Strait of Hormuz to Western countries.
If pursued, this would be a significant move because 1/3 of all oil traded by sea passes through the Strait of Hormuz, and any attempt to close it would risk a major confrontation with the United States. This is Jody Cohen for WION World is One.
The Twitter account that tracked flights of Elon Musk's private jet has been suspended. Musk had earlier said that his commitment to free speech extended to not banning the account. Twitter has also changed its rules over account tracking. Elon Jet, operated by 20-year-old university student Jack Sweeney, used publicly available flight data to track Elon Musk's private jet. The account was restored briefly after Twitter sent out a word that had updated its policies, which clearly outlined that no one could share anyone's current location. But shortly afterwards, the account was suspended again. It had more than 500,000 followers a day earlier. Attempts to reach Sweeney's personal Twitter account was also met with the message that it was suspended. Taking to Twitter, Musk said that any account doxing real-time location information of anyone will be suspended, as it is a physical safety violation. This includes posting links to sites with real-time location information, he said. All right, let's take you to the world of sports. The problems are mounting for defending NBA champions Golden State Warriors. Not only did they lose their 15th game of the season, the San Francisco-based side are also set to be without talesman Stephen Curry for the next few weeks. Despite the Warriors' poor form, reigning final MVP Curry had been his usual self and averages 30 points a game. He had another impressive outing against the Indiana Pacers and was on 38 points when he was forced to leave the court due to a shoulder injury. Curry got hurt in his left shoulder during that third quarter when he collided with Indiana's Jalen Smith. Without Curry on the floor, the Warriors eventually fell to a 119 to 125 point defeat and are now 10th in the Western Conference. Warriors head coach Steve Kerr says that Curry will now undergo an MRI scan.
He's going to get an MRI tomorrow. So, he was ruled out, midway through the fourth. Training staff told me he wasn't going to play the rest of the night, and we'll see. We'll see how he is tomorrow. No, I didn't ask about that. I mean, I just trust their judgment. And they said he's not going back in, and I haven't really, I just checked in with him briefly, but haven't had a chance to go into detail with him.
Virtual reality technology is allowing the Notorious B.I.G., aka Christopher Wallace fans, to catch the late rapper in a new concert. Tech company Meta has joined hands with the Notorious B.I.G. estate for the concert, which will stream online on December 16th. Here's a sneak peek.
Getting this paper, feel me?
No doubt, man. Trying to get that big papa bills.
We going straight to the top, baby. Let's go.
That's all from us here live from New York. I'm Susan Tehrani. Thank you so much for staying with us and watching. Do continue to watch WION for more news and updates coming up. Goodbye.
Many other